welcome to Kino Society with Owen Shapiro. In today's episode, we have Julius Horsthuis, a digital artist. He worked for several years for different post-production companies, Revolver, Carbon, and Hectic Electric. He took creative supervision on what was the most VFX-heavy film in the Netherlands, Koning van Katoren. Welcome to Kino Society, Julius.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So why did you choose to have a career in digital art or just film in general?
I was always fascinated by film. Ever since I was as a small kid, I was very much into really like the visual effects type of, like visual effects heavy films. I think I watched like Back to the Future 2 and Terminator 2 like a million times and always try to recreate it with an old VHS camcorder back in the 90s. And I think ever since I was like about 12 years old, I think I knew I wanted to do something in film. I wanted to direct. I wanted to just be there. So it's just something that some people figure out later in their life, but I figured out pretty early in life that I wanted to make like cool looking visuals, and I thought film was the way to go with that.
So what's a regular workday like for you?
Well, right now it's completely different. I went a long way from working in film, first on the film set and then later in post-production visual effects. But now I no longer work in film. I am a visual artist specializes in fractals, and I see fractals very much as if they were um, scenes from films or environments or sets rather. So a regular workday for me would be I get up, I check my renders for the night because I'm always constantly rendering these fractals. It takes it's a 24-hour render work. It's a lot of render checking and seeing if I can composite something with it. And it really, really, really depends on the type of project that I'm working on. It can be an exhibition. It can be something else. I can be doing something for my social media, or I can be doing like some design work for films, which I'm still doing. So it's very varied. It's really varied.
It doesn't seem like it would be affected by COVID too much, was it?
I was quite lucky with that. Yes, I was affected a little bit. I also did a lot of like exhibitions and also for events doing visuals, and those things all sort of like a year ago in March 2020, everything sort of stopped. The world stopped spinning, but it very quickly I got other things that I could do. Indeed, everything that's online, making music videos, for instance. Working on films, all from home, of course, or my studio, which is in my house. Yes, that all continued. So that was super easy to just continue with that.
So you've also worked in several countries and for very different kinds of films. Yeah, so what is the difference between the filmmaking in different countries and the way that just generally they make movies?
Yeah, so I've mainly worked in the Netherlands on film sets. I did indeed work on an international film like Manchester by the Sea, but this was all post-production work, and this was all done remotely. So I was not on the set of that film. So the most things I've done when I was working for film and visual effects were in the Netherlands, but now I am doing more and more. I'm working sometimes as design with American companies. The difference, of course, is, and this is just really a difference between the Netherlands and the United States that I notice, is the Netherlands is just a small country. The budgets are lower, and there is just a little bit of a different, how would I say that? A different kind of attitude, I guess. I think the Dutch are kind of, maybe this is because I'm Dutch myself, but they're easily satisfied with something, whereas in the United States, it really has to be top notch. It really has to So you feel more when you're working with Americans, you feel much more motivated to really get the best out of it. This is why I think it's more interesting to work for international type of things. And here with the Dutch, they have been quite small projects usually. Even when they're large projects, they were still relatively. I mean, they're relatively large, but they're small if you look at if you would compare it with international productions.
So, do you have any common creative conflicts with any other people involved on your projects, like maybe director?
Have I ever had creative conflict with someone? I don't think I've had creative conflicts. I've had conflicts that were more like how much time do we allocate on a specific scene, like that kind of things, or maybe just a bit like a different vision, like how I was when I was doing the film you mentioned, Koning van Katoren. We had to do 850 visual effects shots for a relatively low budget. It was still high budget, but I mean, it wasn't great. I mean, for 850 shots, so you need to sort of adapt a different kind of attitude in order to make that happen. In order to, like, you could just you don't have the time to polish, each shot to perfection. So you have to sort of find a way to still do it that it doesn't matter, that people will be forgiving in a way that the and that was sort of sometimes creating some conflict. Some people wanted to just make the best shots, but if you want to make the best shots, you can only, I don't know, you can only deliver 100 shots instead of the 800 shots that you need to do. So that kind of conflict happened, but not creatively. But that's usually because as a creative person, I usually work alone, so there's nobody to conflict with. Yeah.
So, how do you think visual effects have evolved or changed over the years?
How have visual effects changed over the years? There is obviously, if you look at, there is, when it comes to visual effects, it started a lot in sort of special effects, on-screen effects. Those were great, miniatures. Then there was the big digital boom starting maybe with Jurassic Park in 1993. Things getting a lot more digital, and then everyone thought that you could make everything with digital. And I think now there's a sort of like a backlash. People are going back to doing visual effects using special effects, using in-camera effects, because they realize that you can't make perfection with, you can't make it look really really realistic with purely digital effects. Now that's one side that I think people realize. And then of course with digital effects, you can do things that you just cannot do in miniatures, things that aren't supposed to look realistic, like other kinds of worlds. Those are things that you can make with digital effects. And this is also something that I have sort of, that's the avenue that I've explored a little bit, with fractals, doing things that are just impossible to do, not just very expensive to do in real life, but just impossible to do. So there's, I think, these two big branches of in visual effects. One going back to trying to do as much in camera as possible. I mean, if you look at all the Christopher Nolan movies, they look amazing. He's trying to do everything real. And then really sort of innovative, cool digital effects that are just specific to what a computer can do. I think those are the two main interesting things that I've seen happen over the last, let's say, decade.
So, more about fractals. Do you think that working in film helped you quite a bit with fractals?
Yes, absolutely. There is not, I think there's not many fractal artists that have a background in film. And this is something that I've sort of brought to the table a little bit when it comes to that. With fractals, it's very abstract. You can make all the colors, you can do, it's 3D fractal, so you can, do lots of crazy camera work, etc. And I what I've learned over about a period of about 16, 17 years working in film is I've learned to work with light, with cameras, with editing. And what I think is interesting is when you go to this sort of really this abstract dimension of things that people have never seen, and like kind of weird, kind of alien looking shapes that people have never seen, is that you try to frame it in a way that people know from filmmaking. So, you use the language of cinematography, use the language of lighting, where you put the camera, how you frame things, how you edit it, like what kind of, cinematic music you play with it. All those tricks from filmmaking, sort of applying them to this really abstract world. I think that is the angle I'm bringing to it, and that is something that I could have never done had I not been trained in film.
So you think VFX are closer to an artistic, like you need more artistic talent to work in VFX, or is it a bit more heavy on the technical side?
I think you really need both. It's very much both. And I when I was working in visual effects, I was the person who was really doing more creative stuff than technical stuff. I was able to do some of the technical stuff, but I found most of it boring, and I would try to, always bend the rules in order to sort of get something creatively. And sometimes you would skip a couple of necessary technical steps just because it would take too long. Most people in visual effects are much more on the technical side. I noticed they want to do it perfectly. They want to sort of have a nice workflow, a great pipeline. They script a little bit on the side so that their tools do exactly what they need them to. You really need both. I don't think that visual effects, it's really yin and yang. It's like I would want to see more creative visual effects for sure, knowing that just creative people isn't going to solve that problem. You're really gonna need both.
So something I hear a lot in modern day is that VFX can pretty much, if you have the money, it can pretty much do anything that traditional 2D animation can do. Everything can be live action if you have the budgets. Do you think that's true?
No, that can't be true, and it can't. I mean, you're talking about like all the remakes of all the Disney, all the Lion King and all these kind of things. It can do what 2D animation can do, but it cannot bring the looks of 2D animation. It cannot, there is something about 2D animation that is specific to that medium or that technique that you can't replicate, then you shouldn't want to. It's a different thing. It's like saying, a theater can do everything that a book can do. Like it might, like you could literally read, the book on stage, but it's a different experience. It's a different. I don't think you could compare the two. And there will always be a place for 2D animation. There's today, people working on old school techniques with doing incredibly imaginative stuff with traditional 2D animation techniques that won't go away. I don't see that.
Yeah, I definitely heavily agree. I don't really know why people are even bothering to watch like all those Disney remakes. They just don't make sense to me.
Well, you can remake something, but you need to then do something different with it. You could say, well, there is an interesting aspect. You don't try to replicate the thing with the exact same emotions. You try to, I'm not against remakes at all. I think there's amazing things to do, but you need to give it something differently. Like the Lion King, indeed, like really didn't do that. But there is potential if you do it right.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Or do you work with a cinematographer for visual continuity?
Quite rarely, in fact. The films that I've worked on, it's quite, I was surprised by how little the cinematographer or even commercials worked more. I think I did more commercials than films. Surprised how little the cinematographer is involved in even a little bit of the post production process. So you would have a cameraman who filmed the entire show, and then one shot would be visual effects, and it needed to be seamless. It needed to be completely believable. And then the first thing I would think is, well, I need to talk to the cinematographer, the cameraman, who because we need to, what lenses did he use, what kind of. Very rarely would the producer and the director sort of facilitate that communication. At least in the Netherlands, that wasn't the case. Except for the Koning van Katoren film that I did, I did spend a lot of creative time with the cinematographer, and he was involved in the entire post-production process. It was a great collaboration. His name is Reinier van Brummelen, and he's really very creative cameraman doing amazing things. But in my country, unfortunately, I thought that was quite rare. But maybe I didn't get to work on the right shows where they do that. Right now, doing fractal art, I do work on films, not that often, but I do some design work and some other work. I don't think I've been really collaborating or even discussing things with the cinematographer. It's usually just a direct.
What's the most challenging visual effect you've ever worked on?
That probably must have been in the Koning van Katoren film. Very creative kind of things. They needed a monster. They needed a dragon in that film. This was the film where the budget was limited. The one where you had to do 850 visual effects shots. There was in the book, this is also a remake from a book, and there is this monster, this dragon monster and that is sort of created by pollution. It's like a metaphor for pollution. He had to fight pollution, but he had to fight a dragon. The director wanted the dragon to be made out of pollution. And because we couldn't really make a realistically great looking dragon, Game of Thrones style, just the budget wasn't there. We sort of looked for creative ways, and we sort of ended up with a sort of a monster that was made up out of, old oil barrels and garbage, basically. And it didn't look specifically like a dragon. It didn't have a head or any eyes. It was just this big blob of oil and dirt. And this was a great fun thing to explore, but also the whole creative process by getting there. Like, how do you, if you don't have a budget for a dragon, how do you still get something that's interesting and that's sort of menacing and dangerous with a budget that you can do? So that was a really great project, and it was challenging for sure.
So are there any particular genres or kinds of film that you enjoy doing most? Like any preferences?
So yeah, what I would like to do as a not, but like now I don't do visual effects supervising anymore because I've really focused now on fractal art as a visual artist. So I wouldn't want to be involved as a VFX supervisor on a film anymore. But if someone would ask me, do you want to make fractals for a specific film, then there was definitely some genres where I would like to be involved in. I'm a big fan of like, let's say, intelligent thriller types of film. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan. So films like that would be great to work on. But of course, when it comes to that, any kind of sort of big budget film is interesting because they would have the kind of budget to create these otherworldly looking environments. So I'm not a big these superhero films. They're interesting, but definitely just very imaginative films. And I think Christopher Nolan is just a great example of that.
So do you have any favorite movies or directors?
Right. So yeah, I mentioned Christopher Nolan. Other favorite directors would be, when it comes to sort of big budget films, James Cameron for sure, David Fincher. And when it comes to sort of other films that I really enjoy, I'm a big fan of Richard Linklater, who did Before Sunrise and Boyhood, and a big Tarantino fan as well. So I think that's the sort of those directors are definitely they've influenced me a lot in the past and still today.
What would you say to someone who wants to enter the world of cinema?
Yeah, this is hard. When I wanted to enter the world of cinema and I was 100% sure about it, I applied to film school 3 separate times. Once I was 18, I think when I was 21, and maybe again when I was 22. And I got rejected all 3 times. Never said specifically why. So that's when I just started working on the film set just to learn the things on the job. If you want to get there and you can't just start doing it. But for me, it was just automatic. Like, okay, I want to do film. I need to be, even if I was just doing cable carrying or whatever, like the most mundane, or even like traffic, holding the traffic or something. That's the very first types of jobs that you can get on the film set. Yeah, I mean, that is something that's extremely important. So you need to understand the language. You need to understand all the different the etiquette on the film set and everything. So that is something I would definitely say. Some people, when it comes to visual effects or that kind of stuff, they're working on their show reels. Everyone needs to have the best show reel, and my advice is just to do a lot. It doesn't, you'll manage your show reel. Your show reel will reflect what your work is like, no, regardless. Of course, you need to have a good reel, but what you want to do is you just want to just work a lot, just understand it, do it and do different things. Don't try, do what everyone else is doing. I think this is in visual effects, especially, and everyone is like doing the specific part of the thing and it looks great. So you want to try it, and it's good to learn, but try it as at the moment that you think, oh, I could do something a little different, or try something that other people aren't trying. Try to sort of develop your own skills. And this can be on the film set as well, I guess. I mean, this is when you want to do something creative, for sure. I guess this applies to lots of creative things. But yeah, you just got to make your hours. You got to have your 10,000 hours, at some point. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed, I guess. You're not going to excel, I should say.
Well, what would you say to someone who's interested in doing fractals?
Same thing. I would say exactly the same thing. It's you want to just play a lot with the software, or maybe if you don't, like, for me, I'm just a software user, but other people are interested in fractals and they can code, so they might want to write their own fractal software, get something, get your own specific look at some point. But before you're there, you should probably just try and do many different things. But the key to all of it is the enjoyment. Like, if someone is enjoying it, you're going to do it automatically. I mean, you shouldn't tell yourself to go do to do it. It's just something that happens if you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then find something, that you do. And if you enjoy it, you're probably going to do a lot of it anyway. So that, I think, is important.
Do you have any current projects?
For sure. Well, currently, right now, I have an exhibition. This is like a digital exhibition that projects 270-degree, almost 360-degree projection, super high resolution, 16K projectors. It's in Artec House, New York City. It's at the Chelsea Market in Manhattan. And it's open till September. And this is something where people can enjoy fractals, being immersed in fractals. This is a project I've worked on for the last year. It was an extremely challenging but great project to do. And I'm working on other exhibitions at the moment. I'm working on full dome projects, so cinemas that are 180-degree domes, like planetariums. That is what I'm doing mostly. Yeah.
So, last but not least, how can my listeners connect with you?
Yeah. So best place to. It's very difficult to talk about my work if you haven't seen it, but best place to see it is on my website or on my Instagram or on my Vimeo. And they're all easily, you can find them easily by just Googling or typing my name anywhere. My name is a little bit difficult. It's Julius, and then it's Horsthuis. It's Horsthuis. That is, and I'm on all the other kind of social media. And so that's how you find me.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to Kino Society on iTunes and Spotify.